I'm a little ratchet, we're from Florida.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I also wanted to ask you about the investigation into your families, but this is also part of her congressional duties. Congresswoman, you're under investigation for the congressional ethics for violation of campaign finances. Congresswoman, this is your district. You have to answer to these people. Congresswoman.
Indictment, please. Well, it's an unjust indictment, and it seems like these intimidation tactics have been pervasive. We spent all week seeing different members getting censured, all in hopes of intimidating and kind of distracting from the Epstein files. And I look forward to my day in court so I can prove myself and actually state the truth. But if this is what Congress is becoming, where they're always trying to intimidate you, scare tactics, especially attacking minorities, black and brown people, then we're going to have to keep fighting for the district. And everybody has been giving me so much support, and we're going to keep fighting until the district gets what it needs, which is fair prices, housing, and fair representation of Congress.
Fox News alert: a sitting Democrat Florida Congresswoman facing a rare public hearing before the House Ethics Committee as she faces federal charges for allegedly stealing $5 million in FEMA COVID relief. This goes back to 2021. Fox senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram joins us with the details now on Capitol Hill. Chad.
Good afternoon. Well, this hearing just started just about 40 minutes ago. It was delayed. And as you say, these types of ethics trials are rare on Capitol Hill. The last one we had was in 2010 for Charlie Rangel, the late New York Democrat. In fact, it was held in the same room. She has been charged with embezzling about $5 million in pandemic aid. And there was some reporting out there earlier today that she had asked the president for a pardon at the White House Christmas party. I asked her about that as she went into the hearing room. She looked at me, she shook her head and said no. Watch this exchange as she went into the room.
Congresswoman, any statement? Congresswoman, any statement? You asked for a pardon in your offices and you did not ask. Any statement, Congresswoman?
She also wanted the committee to postpone the House trial. That's because she's prepping for a criminal trial later this year. Her counsel asked how a judgment by the Ethics Committee will interfere with the presumption of innocence as her case goes forward in Florida.
There's always going to be a risk that the Congresswoman is not going to be able to get a fair trial. And that's not a mistake that this committee has to make.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. What do you think would happen, or what do you think will happen to you if you stole millions of dollars from the federal government? And I'm not talking about some small mistake or a paperwork error. I'm talking about millions of dollars in taxpayer money, money that was meant to help people during a national crisis. Do you think you'll get the benefit of the doubt? And do you think the media will run cover for you? Or do you think you'll be in handcuffs real quick? Because we all know how that story ends for an average American. Now, with that in mind, we got to talk about what's going on in Florida with Democrat Congresswoman Sheila cherfilus-mccormick, because this situation is wild. We're talking about allegations that she took over $5 million in FEMA relief funds, money that was distributed during the pandemic, and used it for things it absolutely was not intended for. And according to the accusations, some of that money went into campaign funds, some of it went into personal accounts, and yes, some of it was even used on luxury purchases like jewelry. So while regular Americans were struggling to survive during COVID, you got a sitting member of Congress allegedly treating relief money like it's her personal bank account. Now, we talked about this before, and you already know the playbook. Instead of accountability, instead of stepping up and addressing the accusations head on, what do we get? The same excuse we always hear. Suddenly, it's not about the money. It's not about the evidence. It's not about the taxpayers. It's about race. It's about identity. It's about they are targeting me because I'm a black woman. And at some point, people have to stop falling for that, because if you took the money, you took the money. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter the race. But here's where things take a serious turn, because this isn't just talk anymore. This isn't just allegations floating around in the media. She's now facing real consequences, not just legally, but politically, because the House of Ethics Committee stepped in. They held a public process, and let's just say the outcome was not good news for her. So now we're looking at potential punishment, possible expulsion, and a situation that's getting worse by the day. So in this video, we're going to break it all the way down. What exactly is she accused of doing? What did the investigation find? And what does this say about accountability in Washington right now? Because this is bigger than just one politician. This is about whether the system actually works. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and now I want you guys to check this out.
Kim, thank you. Members of the House Ethics Committee are holding a rare public hearing concerning its investigation into Florida Democratic Congresswoman Sheila cherfilus-mccormick. She was indicted after being accused of stealing millions of dollars in federal relief funds. NBC6's political reporter Steve Litz joins us live in the newsroom with the latest this evening. Steve.
And hey, Juan, Ethics Committee members, these meetings typically happen behind closed doors, but members of the committee decided this is a matter of great public interest, and so the public should be able to watch.
It's a rare Ethics Committee hearing held in public for South Florida Congresswoman Sheila cherfilus-mccormick. She's accused of stealing money from the federal government and denies the allegations.
A lot has been said about what was done, but it was never done. There's no place ever in my life where I was ever accused of anything. And so we look forward to the facts and defending ourselves.
The first order of business was cherfilus-mccormick's lawyer asking this matter not be held in public and be delayed.
For me to rush into it, having only had the case for 2.5, 3 weeks, that's dangerous territory. I mean, lawyers really shouldn't be practicing law like that.
We want you to be prepared, but we don't want to face a new lawyer every time we have a hearing asking for a continuance because they need time to prepare. And I believe this is, what, the third lawyer or the fifth lawyer? Fourth lawyer.
Politically, the House Ethics Investigative Subcommittee is accusing her of failing to follow campaign finance laws. She's also criminally charged with theft of government funds, money laundering, and 13 other counts. Investigators say her family medical company received an overpayment of $5 million in COVID disaster relief funds and never paid it back. The company had a contract to register people for COVID vaccinations. The contract was for about $50,000.
Today's hearing lasted about an hour from 4 to 5, and today's argument was only about whether this matter should be delayed or not. Members of the ethics panel went into executive session after their meeting. They're going to make a decision as to whether to move forward with this hearing in the near future or if it should be delayed until around summertime.
All right, so now that you've seen what's going on, let's actually break this down because this is where things go bad to worse for Sheila cherfilus-mccormick, okay? And I want you guys to check out this article as you guys see right here on the screen because it says House Ethics Committee finds Florida lawmaker guilty of stealing $5 million in relief funds. Okay. So I've got some very, very, very bad news for her. And I mean very bad because it's not just that they're looking into it anymore. It's not just that there might be another hearing because according to the findings, the House Ethics Committee has already come to a conclusion and it's not in her favor. A bipartisan House Ethics Committee, meaning both Democrats and Republicans, found her guilty on 25 out of 27 counts related to the misuse of over $5 million in FEMA disaster relief funds. Let that sink in because this isn't partisan politics. This isn't Republicans going after a Democrat. This is both sides looking at the evidence and saying, yeah, something very serious happened here. And according to the report, she improperly funneled those funds for personal use, including financing her own campaign. So now we're not just talking about mismanagement. We're talking about using taxpayer funded emergency relief money to benefit yourself politically. And that's a completely different level of corruption. And it's exactly the kind of thing that destroys public trust. And look at how extensive this investigation was, because we're talking about years of work, interviews with 23 witnesses, and a review of hundreds of thousands of documents. This wasn't rushed. This wasn't thrown together. This was a deep, detailed investigation, and the result was a guilty finding on the overwhelming majority of the charges. Now, here's another key detail that a lot of people are overlooking. This was the first time in 16 years that the House Ethics Committee held a public hearing like this for a sitting lawmaker. The last time was Charles Rangel back in 2010. So this is not something that happens often. And when it does happen, it means the situation is very serious, right? So now I want to read, right? Because it says the House Ethics Committee has ruled that Representative Sheila cherfilus-mccormick, a Democrat in Florida, improperly funneled more than $5 million in federal disaster funds for personal use, including financing her own campaign. And an eight-member bipartisan subcommittee found cherfilus-mccormick guilty early Friday morning on 25 out of 27 counts of embezzling the money from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The decision followed a rare public hearing on Thursday, according to the New York Times. It marked the first time in 16 years that the panel held a public hearing regarding a sit-in lawmaker. The last time, like I told you guys, was in 2010 with Representative Charles Rangel, Democrat in New York, guilty of 11 violations. Shortly after the House returns from the April recess, the full committee will hold a hearing to determine what, if any, sanction would be appropriate for the committee to recommend, said Ethics Chairman Michael Guest and Ranking Member Mark DeSalinar in a joint statement. DeSalinar said that years-long investigation, including interviews with 23 witnesses and a review of hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, the Times reported. And quote, the allegations before us are extremely serious, the Salinar said. They also implicate the public's confidence in the House's integrity as an institution. The expectation among many members is that cherfilus-mccormick, if she does not resign, will face a vote to expel her from the House, the Hill reported. Representative Greg Stubbe said this week he is preparing a resolution to expel cherfilus-mccormick as soon as the ethics panel completes its formal process. Expelling a member of Congress takes a 2/3 majority vote. In addition to the ethics panel investigation, the Justice Department charged cherfilus-mccormick and 3 others, including her brother, in November with stealing the FEMA funds. The panel typically defers to law enforcement on penalties, issuing fines or rebukes, and on only rarely recommended that a lawmaker be removed from office, the Times said. If convicted on criminal charges, cherfilus-mccormick could face up to 53 years in prison. cherfilus-mccormick has denied any wrongdoing. However, she reportedly approached President Trump last year seeking clemency, according to The Hill. All right. So you guys seen that. You heard that. I read it. There you go. Proof is in the pudding. So like I said, the committee has already said they're going to determine what punishment to recommend, and that could include fines, sanctions, or even expulsion from Congress. And yes, that's already being discussed. There are lawmakers preparing to push for her removal entirely, which requires, like I said, 2/3 vote. On top of that, this isn't just an ethics issue anymore. It's a criminal case. The Department of Justice already filed charges, and if she's convicted, 53 years in prison. So when people try to brush this off or act like it's not a big deal, you have to ask, does this sound like a minor issue, or does this sound like someone who got caught in something serious? And now the pressure shifts to Democrats and leadership, because the question becomes simple. Are you going to hold your own accountable, or are you going to look the other way? And when Hakeem Jeffries was asked about it, his response told us everything we need to know. Now I want you guys to go ahead and take a look at this. Check it out.
Room here in the Longworth House office building will be the site of something not seen in Congress in 16 years, a House Ethics Committee trial. On trial today is Sheila cherfilus-mccormick. She is a Democrat from Florida. She's been charged with embezzling $5 million in COVID money. And there's been criticism by some House Democrats that their leaders have not been as forceful as they should be, asking for her to resign.
If there's a Republican effort to censure or expel cherfilus-mccormick this week, are Democrats going to oppose that? Next question.
What could be the penalty for the Congresswoman? Well, one of her Sunshine State colleagues already has an idea.
Regardless, whatever comes out of the hearing, I'll move on expulsion.
Now, the Congresswoman says that she's innocent, and she's frustrated that the committee is moving ahead with this hearing as she awaits a criminal trial in Florida, and we might not find out what the committee decides to do about her today.
So you saw that response, and honestly, it tells you everything. Hakeem Jeffries gets asked a direct question about whether his colleagues should face consequences, whether there should be a censure or expulsion, and his answer is next question. That's it. And that's the leadership response to a scandal involving millions of dollars in taxpayer money and a bipartisan finding of guilt. Now, and imagine for a second this was a Republican. Be honest, do you really think the response would be next question? Or do you think we'll be seeing press conferences, public statements, and immediate calls for resignation? Why don't the Democrats keep that same energy when it comes to their own? And also, this just proves how they run into the Victim Olympics, even though they create crimes or they commit crimes, and the simple fact of self-enrichment and worrying about party over the people that they're supposed to be representing. And this is just another example of justifying President Donald Trump's point, right? If you see what's running rampant, obviously, when it comes to these Democrats, it happens to be them and their party that continues to basically be the ones that's committing fraud and doing the most scandalous things ever. And I'm not saying that Republicans are innocent, but the simple fact is I'm saying is right now, currently, fraud is running rampant within the states that happen to be Democrats, and Democrats happen to be running fraud, but then they'll sit there and try to undermine or sit there and try to delegitimize what President Donald Trump is saying, but she's obviously proven a point as they are convicting their own silently behind the scenes, but they won't say it out loud because it's the very thing they don't want to be known for. So they keep trying to deflect and they'll say next question, but they'll never address it. And we all know that Hakeem Jeffries is good for word solid, because when you've seen how that plays out, right, with the Republicans, they will be going, you know, all basically put it like this: hell will freeze over, because the Democrats will keep talking about it, and it will be covered 24/7, 365 days in a year on mainstream liberal media. And when it's on the other side, the outrage is consistent when it comes to these Democrats continue to basically scold Republicans because the pressure is immediate, and leadership makes it very clear that the behavior is unacceptable when it comes to Republicans. But here it's different, right? When it comes to Democrats bashing Republicans and holding them accountable. But it's different here when Democrats is on Democrats holding each other accountable, because here's the hesitation, here's the avoidance, it's silence. And what creates the perception, and let's be real, the reality of a double standard and how accountability is applied in Washington. Now, beyond the politics, there's also a legal reality here that people need to understand, right? When an ethics committee conducts a multi-year investigation, interviews dozens of witnesses, reviews massive amounts of documentation, and then finds you guilty on 25 counts, that doesn't just stay in a political lane. That kind of finding can absolutely have implications for a criminal case, especially when the Department of Justice is already involved. Because at the end of the day, both processes are looking at the same core question: what happened to the money? It all comes down to the money. Where did it go? And was it used legally? And if one body has already gone through the evidence and reached that conclusion, that's something you just can't ignore. From a constitutional standpoint, Congress has the authority to discipline and even expel its own members. That power exists for situations exactly like this, because the founders understood that corruption inside the government is a direct threat to the system itself. This isn't optional, and President Donald Trump understands that. And this is a part of maintaining the integrity of the institution, right? And yet, what we're seeing right now is a reluctance to act decisively, at least from leadership. And that's where the frustration comes from. It's not just about what she's accused of doing. It's about how the system responds when one of its own is caught up in something like this. Supporters will say, let the process play out. And sure, due process matters. But due process doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean avoiding a question. It doesn't mean pretending that a bipartisan finding of guilt isn't a big deal. Leadership still has a responsibility to set a standard. And right now, that standard is very unclear, right? In the name of fraud, in the name of illegals. And that's why this story matters beyond just this one case, because it speaks to a bigger issue. Whether accountability in Washington is real, or whether it depends on who you are and which side you're on. So I want to bring all this together, right? Because at this point, the situation is pretty clear. When you have a bipartisan House Ethics Committee come out and say, yeah, you did this, when they find you guilty on 25 out of 27 counts tied to millions of dollars in taxpayer funds, we talking $5 million here. That's not just a bad headline, as you guys see on the screen. That's a flashing red warning sign for what's coming next. Because here's the reality. If it's going that badly for you on the ethics side, your criminal case is probably not headed in a good direction either. That's just common sense. These are separate processes, sure, but they're built on the same facts, the same paper trail, the same financial decisions. And if one body already spent years digging through evidence and came to that conclusion, then you better believe that's going to matter when this plays out in court. And we're not talking about a slap on the wrist either. We're talking about potential consequences that could change the rest of her life. If she's convicted, she could be looking at over 50 years in prison. And that's not politics anymore. That's your future gone. And that's why people look at this situation and say, why are we even still here? Why did it take this long to reach this point? Because from the outside looking in, it feels like accountability should have happened a long time ago. And let's just be honest about what people are seeing. There's a pattern when it comes to how these situations get handled. When it's Democrats, especially the one party feels politically or culturally invested in, there's hesitation, there's delay, and there's the instinct to defend first and deal with the facts later. But if there were a Republican, does anybody really believe this would still be dragging on? Or would that person have already been pushed out, forced to resign, and publicly condemned? The double standard is exactly what frustrates Americans, because it makes it look like the rules don't apply equally depending on who you are. Now, looking ahead, the real question is whether Congress is actually going to follow through. Expulsion is on the table, but it requires a 2/3 vote, which means Democrats are going to have to make a decision. Are they going to stand on principle and say this is unacceptable, or are they going to protect one of their own? Because if they do the right thing, then at least you can say the system worked in this case, right? Because not to mention they still trying to abolish ICE in the name of fraud because they're protecting illegals over American citizens. I feel like you got to wipe out the whole damn Democrat Party. And whatever rhino Republican that don't want to sit there and enforce law and order to protect our country with the borderlines, wipe out that damn party too. I could care less. I'm just being straight up honest with you. Because accountability has to exist, right? You can say that accountability still exists and that no one is above the law, but if they drag their feet or try to downplay this in other situations like illegals, giving them free health care and things like that, being propped up by the insurance companies to send you money and then getting money funded to you from your political party from outside the country because you want to basically cater, in this case, Democrats to the far left progressive individuals, which is only a small, tiny bunch of them. But that's getting you paid, even if it means taking APAC money and all of that type of mess. And then on top of that, propped up with the insurance company because then you're giving out illegals money that can't be tracked. Or, I mean, you're letting insurance companies give free healthcare to illegals that can't be tracked, but then you're getting kickbacks on the back end from insurance companies that you buddy with. So it's all power and leverage, but used to the benefit of the party and not accurately being used for the right things, let alone also not enabling people, such as making people that's not supposed to be in this country in the first place because they are illegal feel entitled to stay here as crime run rampant. And then you got American taxpayers and then you got legal immigrants who came over here and done the right thing, basically have to deal with crime running rampant because illegals are so entitled that then they can run around like a child with no home training and do what they want when they want to do it because they got all these incentives to continue to do what they want because they're getting taken care of with free healthcare, free housing, etc. All off the backs of American taxpayers who end up suffering, possibly dying. Not to mention that it was an 83-year-old somewhere in his 80s in New York that just recently happened under Zohran Mudami watch when he was getting off the train or he was on the train station. And the illegal that was in this country that got deported 4 times and brought his ass back here pushes an 80-year-old veteran onto the train tracks. The 80-year-old veteran basically falls into the train tracks on the train station of New York, hit his head on the train on the rails or on the tracks of the train, and then dies. And it's an illegal that been deported 4 times and still brought his ass back in this country. So I'm just being honest with you. It's ridiculous. So if either party can't get their act together, or whoever can, expulsion then, in the name of protecting the American taxpayer for not continuing to get their money spent and these politicians spending money like it's their own. Wipe out the whole damn party if that's what we got to do and keep the ones who got common sense and actually care about the American people and actually not just frivolously spending and then sitting here like it's their own money when it's American taxpayers and we trusting you guys as public officials to continue to uphold this country and make it go in the right direction for children's and our children. Because that's what pisses me off, okay? And yeah, this is off script because I'm just speaking passionately. I don't care. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But if they drag their feet, right, which we know that Democrats is good for doing when it's their own, and that's why we can't get convictions here, even though we see Ilhan Omar with Minnesota and Somali fraud. Yeah, JD Vance came out today and said that she's under investigation. But is she really going to get convicted? Is this lady, Miss McCormick, named after seasonings, the seasoning company McCormick, is she really going to get convicted? Because at the end of the day, I'm tired of the talking. I'm an actions type of guy. All right. And I'm sure many Americans or you watching this is an actions person too, especially when you work hard for what you got and your taxpayer money, you getting taxed to death. And this is what's happening. $5 million. She just funneling it like it's her own money. Right. So like I say, if they drag their feet or try to downplay this sends a very different message. It's not like the Democrats ain't already sending a different message because they're doing the most treasonous anti-American things. But at the end of the day, this isn't just about one Congresswoman anymore. It's my whole point with my whole spiel and tangent. It's about whether the people in power are actually willing to hold each other accountable when it matters. I don't care if it's your best friend, best friend. I don't care if y'all buddies in I don't care. Because if they're not, then what does that say about the system as a whole? I gave you guys my take. Let me know down in the comments and get this video a big thumbs up. And based on everything we're seeing right now, this is not looking good for her. And when your own colleagues, in this case the Democratic Party I'm talking about, are coming to 3 conclusions when federal charges are already on the table, when investigators have spent years building this case, you are in serious trouble. And this is the kind of situation that ends careers and puts people behind bars. So now we wait and see what happens next. Do Democrats step up and do what they're supposed to do, or do they fall back into the same pattern we seen before? That's the real test. But I want to hear from you. Do you think she should be expelled immediately? Do you think this has taken too long already? Or do you think the process is playing out the way it should? Let me know down in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss the next one. And before we wrap this up, I want to be very clear about something, right? My purpose and the purpose of anybody who claims to follow Christ, I'm a believer, is to be the salt and light of the earth. And that means standing on truth, calling out wrongdoing, and not being afraid to say what's right, even when it's unpopular, okay? And this situation right here is exactly why that matters. Because when you remove accountability, when you excuse corruption, when you allow people in power to abuse the system without consequences, what you get is chaos. And that's exactly what Scripture warns us about. And the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2, when the righteous are in authority, the people will rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And that's not complicated. So when leaders are honest, when they follow the law, and when they respect what is right, society functions the way it's supposed to. But when corruption is tolerated, when wrongdoing is ignored, when truth is pushed aside for politics, people suffer. Okay? This is why I do what I do. This is why I do these videos, because every time they tell a lie, I'm going to tell the damn truth. So trust breaks down, systems fail, and what we're watching in situations like this is exactly that tension playing out in real time. So the question is not just what these politicians are going to do. The real question is, what are you going to do in your own life? And are you willing to stand on truth even when it's uncomfortable? Are you willing to hold people accountable not based on who they are, but based on what is right? Because being a light doesn't mean staying quiet. It means showing people what righteousness actually looks like. So ask yourself this. In a world where accountability is becoming more and more optional, are you living in a way that reflects truth, or are you going along with the crowd to go along to get along? On that note, family, catch you in the next one. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. As always, peace.